what is a regulatory crisis and why you think we have arrived in that in America. Or, well, you have arrived. We're in our own
Well,
problems over here.
yeah, and so does the EU, and so does everybody. So, and we can talk about some of that too. I'll include what I can. It's a little harder now that UK broke from EU because now that's like a whole new set of rules to follow. So what's a regulatory crisis? Most of the time, if you just Google regulatory crisis, what you're going to find out is that they use that term when a company gets into trouble. Let's say that they have some legal challenges, regulatory challenges. Maybe they've been that threatens their reputation, their operations, their financial stability. Maybe there's some lawsuits. The SEC is investigating them. Something. So a regulatory crisis for a company is a crisis when regulators, right, are coming to the door. So I'm not using it that way. The way I want to use it is that this is a regulatory crisis that involves all of Wall Street and all of Washington, right? So it's this the crisis is in the regulations itself and the way people adhere to it. So I only found, when I started looking into this, I found one author, only one, in 2011. His name is Pablo Triana, and in 2011 he wrote a book called "The Number That Killed Us: A Story of Modern Banking, Flawed Mathematics, and Big Financial Crisis." Right, so that just says it all, right? So what he said was, here's a quote: "For the 2007 crisis was at its core a regulatory crisis, either because of enforcing conceptually flawed rules or neglectful policing of the rules. Bank regulators made it possible for the big banks to toxify their balance sheets with bad leverage." And that, kind of in a nutshell, right? So the structure that I use to make categories of crisis is from these Sanford Levinson and Jack Balkin, who are at the University of Pennsylvania, and they published an article in 2009 called "Constitutional Crisis," right? Where this is a word I think that a lot of people, especially recently in the US, we've all been hearing about the constitutional crisis. So what do you do in a situation where, for example, in January 2021, the new president is due to take office on January 21, I think it was 2021, 20th or 21st.
I think it was the
And
20th.
the old president,
Yeah.
And the old president decides not to leave. There's nothing in the Constitution that says, here's what you do, right? And so if we're following the rule of law, and the Constitution being the basis for most of those laws, if you follow any of this U.S. Court battles, they all come down to, you violated my constitutional right to freedom of the press, freedom of speech, whatever it is, like the first 10 amendments were all the Bill of Rights. So in that structure, what you have is what they define were 3 levels. So at its core, let me put it to you this way. What do you think is the central purpose of regulations, financial regulations? Like, what do you think is it, like, at its heart, what do you think they do?
I would say they're there to govern the way in which all financial institutions should conduct themselves.
Right. So they make possible financial transactions.
Yeah. Okay. So
right? It makes it possible to have financial transactions because everyone has this set of rules that they follow. I did an article once on how laws are formed, like how you can't take the U.S. financial regulatory system and transplant it whole en masse, right? And just say, here, Russia, do it this way, or here, Poland, or here, whatever. Like, which in the 80s, we did a lot of that, 80s and 90s, where we would just sort of take whole cloth the system that we have, the self-regulatory system that we have, and try to just implant it, in these other countries. It never works, and for reasons that we could go into. But so in the context of the financial system and the way that I want to use the phrase regulatory crisis. It's a point where financial transactions are no longer possible, right? So this self-regulatory structure we have actually threatens to fail at the very task that we've given it, which is that they make possible financial transactions. So I look at it, if you look at, as an example, taking away the buy button in January of 2020, right? Or was it 2021? Sorry.
2021. No, 2021. Sorry, you make me think of question
my
myself.
book came out a year earlier, right? Yeah. So taking away the buy button means that a whole group of household investors are unable to complete financial transactions. That's a turning point, right? That's a point where whatever system was in place of regulations broke, right? And it failed at its primary duty, which was to make those transactions possible. So there are different levels, and I think that they're progressive, right? So there's a level one situation where, and we see this all the time, the SEC, the Washington and Wall Street are so, like Gary Gensler says this all the time. Well, I can only do what's in the laws, right? What Congress permits me to do. I can't do anything else. So he's holding this fidelity, right? He's being so loyal to these rules the way that they've been written that he can't make any changes. And the same thing with Wall Street. Well, the market maker exemption exists for a reason, to liquidity. I think was the question you wanted to ask me about later.
Yeah.
So in the name of liquidity, we can do anything that we want to do. Like, we can take your money and give you nothing because it's all in the name of liquidity, which is so insane. It's so insane, as absurd, because liquidity means bringing in more buyers and sellers, not pretending like there's worse transactions, right? Not pretending like, oh, I'll sell you as many of that as you want to buy, because I don't have to deliver them. I'm a market maker. So I'm not even a market. So that's kind of level one, right? So then level two is where you feel the regulators, Wall Street, again, Washington, Wall Street, feel that the circumstances they're in are so extraordinary, so unusual. We must make an exception for this particular purpose, because this black swan event has never happened before, right? Think of from 2003 until 2007, 2008, Reg Show, short selling. We have to make it possible. Short sellers are the saviors of the marketplace, so all of that language over and over again, that level one fidelity, it has to be, we have to protect it, it has to be possible. Then the SEC decides that no one can short sell stocks of a bank. So this is a level two. Now we've risen to another level of crisis here, where we're saying that although last week we loved our laws and wouldn't change them or break them, now we have to break them. And there's so many examples, especially in the 2008, throughout the great financial crisis, the Great Recession that followed, all the things that Treasury, Federal Reserve did in connection with Wall Street. Again, this Washington Wall Street thing. So this is what I call a level two. Now we've come to another level where all the rules that the regulators felt so strongly and clung to for as their lifeboat, all of a sudden, but this one we don't have to follow this one right now because things are so special and different. And then the next piece is that level three, right, where what was just public discourse, disagreements about how the rules are written, how the rules are enforced, all of those things, all that goes by the wayside, and the public just goes into an uprising. If you think of the 2008 Occupy movement, right, in Oakland, California, we got to the point where people were in the streets protesting for in favor of the 99%, against the 1%. That was really the discussion surrounding the Occupy Wall Street movement. In Oakland, California, they were investigated by the FBI, Department of Justice, local police. There was actually a commission formed to investigate the activities of the Oakland police. And the findings in that report were that, in fact, they used military style force against the protesters in that movement. Now, in the United States, like I've been around long enough to remember Kent State, to remember the 1964 Democratic Convention, where we know that our, just say in general, police force, military, National Guard, local police, that they will shoot protesters. They do that here. We know they do that here. I know there's a lot of countries where they do and don't, but here it's not the first time that that sort of thing has happened. So this is level three crisis, and let's just stick with those. Those were political, in the 60s. It was about race, it was about politics, it was about the Vietnam War. Here, let's just talk about the financial stuff. In France, the workers rose up against the CEOs and the bosses and held them hostage in their factories, demanding that they get their share of the output, right? And that was all again about that whole thing was brought about by all three pieces of that crisis or all three levels were brought about by these problems in the financial regulations. So that's a regulatory crisis. I am using it, as I said, I've only found one other author who uses it that way. I'm using it in a fairly unique way. Well, let's just say a unique way, if only one other person used it. And also, I'm trying to add some structure to it so that we can understand where we are. And in my view, we've already done 1, 2, and we're into 3 now.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, the point where honestly, I'm also not I'm not unfamiliar with protesters being shot and leading to a breakdown of law and order where people don't realize, because I don't know if you know, in my home country, in the
Yeah, are you Irish?
70s, yeah, Northern Ireland. So in the
Northern
70s,
Ireland, yeah. I mean, that's exactly, yeah. Sorry, if I'd forgotten that was your background.
yeah, Bloody Sunday, like the U2
Yeah,
song, is because
yeah,
14 unarmed protesters got shot in the back by British paratroopers
exactly,
for, yeah,
exactly. So
protesting.
that's a that's a crisis,
Hmm.
right? That has unfolded that far too often it just gets brushed aside into history. And we don't stop and say what exactly happened there that the military decided to take up arms against the citizens, right? In Russia, just one more aside there, because it's not really, well, it's kind of financial, but when Yeltsin, there was the uprising, and then Yeltsin became president, so the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism, etc. What happened there was that the military refused to take up arms to actually shoot the citizens. They refused because they said, no, these are my cousins and brothers and family members, and these are all the people that I know. I'm not going to take up arms against them. That doesn't happen very often, but it can and does happen where the military simply says, I'm not going to do it. This is not the way to resolve this crisis. There has to be a better way than let's just shoot the citizens. I mean, think about it. Just think about how absurd that is. That your own government takes up arms against you. And that was, of course, the basis for the Second Amendment to the Constitution in the U.S. was that we should be able to protect ourselves if the government comes after us for some reason. So.
Yeah, yeah, and all those scenarios are worth remembering. I wanted to show you, actually. I'm not sure if you saw earlier this year. The BlackRock offices in Paris were stormed by protesters after the French government proposed to, or actually no, I think they went ahead with selling a bunch of like the pensions off to BlackRock. So I'm just gonna see if I can
Oh
share
yeah,
this
I haven't
here.
seen. I don't remember seeing that. Do you remember what month that
It
was?
was April, so here it is. I don't know if this is gonna come up. Ah, yeah, here it is. Um, so yeah, check this one out.
Okay.
Protesters are chanting, waving flags, carrying flares. Smoke is filling the building. It is the 11th day of nationwide demonstrations against the country's new pension bill. If you're unfamiliar, it raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. It has infuriated staff.
They intend to continue their protest.
So there was, and I don't actually, as far as I understand, what they have reported there in that video, they said in the video that it was because the retirement age was being raised. But my understanding of it was that people were not as much protesting the retirement age being raised as they were the state-owned pensions being sold off to BlackRock and a bunch of other financial institutions. So yeah, so there's plenty of examples in history and in 2023.
And the daily news, right? Yeah, I follow France 24, so I'll go to their YouTube and see if I can get some more details on that. So, but God bless the French. I'm telling you, of all the the pitchfork moments that we have in the States, people just like sort of yawn and go about their business, or I'm too busy, I have to take kids to soccer practice. I have these first world problems to deal with. I can't deal with crises. The French just remember when the farmers put their trucks all around, they ringed the city with their trucks so no one could get in and out. I mean, God bless them. When it comes to protests, I don't know. I just don't know another country that of course, I don't know everything everybody does, but they really know how to throw a protest.
Yeah, the Dutch farmers had good ones as well. They were spraying manure at politicians' houses. Yeah, which was hilarious as well. But yeah, be ungovernable, be like the French. Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.